HOA Karen vandalized elderly dad's bench, sentenced to rehab service. The park was silent, save for the faint rustle of leaves and the distant hum of a lawnmower. Then came the scream, a raw, guttural cry that tore through the evening, calm like a knife. You destroyed it. You destroyed his memory. In the heart of Willow Creek, a quiet suburban enclave, the community park was a sanctuary. At its center stood a simple wooden bench, its armrests worn smooth by years of use, a brass plaque glinting with the words, "In loving memory of James Hartley, father and friend." For Tom Hartley, an 82-year-old widower, that bench was more than wooden nails. It was a lifeline to his late father, a place where he'd sit every evening, tracing the plaque's letters with his weathered fingers, whispering stories of his childhood to the wind. But tonight, that sacred space was gone. Splintered planks lay scattered across the grass, the plaque smeared with red spray paint, the words now illegible under a cruel dripping scrawl, "Get out." Karen Whitaker, the self-appointed queen of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, stood a few feet away, her arms crossed, lips curled into a smug half-smile. She was a woman who thrived on control, her clipboard always at the ready, her voice sharp enough to slice through any neighbor's patience. For months, she'd been waging a silent war against Tom's bench, claiming it was an eyesore that violated HOA regulations. The truth was uglier. Karen wanted the park modernized, her vision of sleek metal benches and manicured flower beds leaving no room for sentimental relics like Tom's. Tom's hands shook as he gripped his cane, his voice cracking with rage. "This was my father's. You had no right." The crowd of neighbors, drawn by the commotion, began to gather, their murmurs growing into a low rumble of disbelief. Karen didn't flinch. That bench was unauthorized. She snapped, her tone dripping with condescension. "I did this community a favor." The seeds of this disaster had been planted months earlier. Karen's reign over the HOA was legendary, her rules enforced with the zeal of a dictator. She'd fined Mrs. Lopez for planting roses without approval, issued warnings to the Nguyen kids for skateboarding, and even demanded the removal of a birdhouse because it clashed with the aesthetic. But Tom's bench was her obsession. She'd sent him letters, left voicemails, and once cornered him at the grocery store, her voice syrupy with fake concern. "Tom, we're just trying to keep things uniform. You understand?" Tom, soft-spoken but stubborn, refused to budge. The bench wasn't just his, it belonged to the neighborhood. A place where kids carved their initials, where couples shared first kisses, where old friends swapped stories. Karen's crusade wasn't about rules, it was personal. The tension had simmered for weeks, but no one expected it to boil over like this. Karen's campaign escalated when she started rallying other HOA members, spinning tales of Tom's stubborn defiance and disrespect for community standards. Most dismissed her, but a few eager to curry favor nodded along. Then came the twist no one saw coming. Karen's own nephew, Ethan, a lanky 19-year-old with a guilty conscience, had been roped into her scheme. She'd convinced him to help her send a message to Tom, promising it was just a prank to shake him up. Ethan, desperate for his aunt's approval, had reluctantly agreed, grabbing a can of spray paint from her garage. But what he didn't know was that Karen had no intention of stopping at a warning. She wanted the bench gone. That night, under the cover of darkness, Karen and Ethan crept into the park. She handed him the paint can, her voice low and venomous. "Make it quick. Make it bold." Ethan hesitated, his hands trembling, but Karen's glare was unrelenting. He sprayed the plaque, the red paint hissing like a snake. Then Karen took a crowbar from her bag, her movements deliberate, almost gleeful, as she smashed the bench to pieces. Ethan froze, horrified, as the wood splintered under her blows. "Aunt Karen, this is too much," he whispered, but she waved him off. This is what happens to people who don't listen. The next evening, Tom arrived at the park for his nightly ritual, only to find his father's memorial in ruins. His cry of anguish drew the neighbors, and soon, the scene was a powder keg. Karen, caught red-handed with paint on her shoes, stood her ground, her voice rising over the crowd. "This is my park, I decide what stays," she shouted, her face flushed with defiance. Tom, his eyes brimming with tears, pointed a trembling finger at her. "You didn't just break a bench, you broke a piece of my heart." The crowd's anger surged. Mrs. Lopez, usually timid, stepped forward, her voice shaking. "You've gone too far. Karen, this isn't about rules, it's about cruelty." Mr. Nyan, a retired mechanic, joined in, his voice booming. "You think you own us? You're nothing but a bully." Even Ethan, pale and shaking, broke his silence. "I didn't know she'd go this far," he stammered, his confession hanging in the air like smoke. The neighbors gasped. Karen's own nephew turning against her was a blow no one expected. Karen's facade cracked. "You ungrateful little," she began. But the crowd drowned her out, their voices a chorus of outrage. Someone called the police, and soon, blue lights flashed across the park. The officers surveyed the wreckage, their faces grim as they listened to Tom's story and Ethan's tearful admission. Karen, cornered, tried to spin a tale of community improvement, but the evidence was damning: the paint can in her car, the crowbar with her fingerprints, and Ethan's testimony. The fallout was swift. The police charged Karen with vandalism and destruction of property. The HOA, under pressure from the furious community, stripped her of her presidency. But the real reckoning came at the courthouse a month later. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with a reputation for fairness, listened as Tom spoke, his voice steady despite his grief. "That bench was all I had left of my father," he said. "She didn't just destroy wood, she stole my memories." Ethan, testifying as a witness, admitted his role, his voice breaking as he apologized to Tom. The courtroom was silent, the weight of his betrayal palpable. Karen, defiant to the end, claimed she was protecting the neighborhood's value. The judge wasn't swayed. "Mrs. Whitaker," she said, her voice like steel, "your actions were not about community. They were about ego. You've caused real harm." The sentence was a gut punch: 200 hours of community service at a local rehabilitation center for seniors, where Karen would spend her days cleaning, serving meals, and facing the elderly residents she dismissed as irrelevant. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Karen, who despised Tom's old bench, was now forced to serve the very demographic she'd scorned. As the gavel fell, Tom felt no joy, only a hollow relief. The bench could be rebuilt, but the trust Karen had shattered would take longer to mend. The neighborhood rallied around him, raising funds for a new bench, this one sturdier, with a new plaque in memory of James Hartley, forever loved, at the unveiling. Tom sat quietly, his fingers tracing the fresh engraving, a faint smile breaking through his grief. The crowd cheered, but their eyes were on Karen, who stood at the edge of the park, her community service vest a bright orange reminder of her fall. The story didn't end there. Karen's service hours were grueling, each day a reminder of her actions. The seniors at the rehab center, aware of her story, were unforgiving. Some refused her help. Others made pointed comments about respect. Karen, stripped of her power, began to crumble under the weight of her own choices. Meanwhile, Ethan, racked with guilt, started volunteering at the park, helping repair what his aunt had broken. His small acts of redemption became a quiet counterpoint to Karen's punishment. Willow Creek was never the same. The bench became a symbol not just of loss, but of resilience. Neighbors grew bolder, questioning the HOA's overreach, demanding transparency. Tom, once a quiet figure, became a voice for the community, his story a reminder that even the smallest acts of cruelty could spark a reckoning. As for Karen, her name became a cautionary tale, whispered in the park where the new bench stood strong. What do you think? Was Karen's punishment fair? Or did she deserve more or less? Share your thoughts. Let's talk about justice, community, and the cost of ego.